Good afternoon, gardeners. It's Saturday, March 20th, and it's the first day of spring, but it's a cold, dreary, and windy winter-like day here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. But despite this bad weather that we're having today, the end of the cold weather is in sight, and I have all of the energy of spring flowing through my veins, and I am ready to start planting my spring and summer crops. So what I want to do with you today is discuss a way that you can get your warm season vegetables that are frost tender planted up to 2 weeks earlier. And these are things like your tomatoes, your peppers, and other frost sensitive vegetation. When it comes to growing warm season annuals, my favorite thing to grow by far are tomatoes. I absolutely love tomatoes. I come from Italian descent. They're in practically everything I cook on a daily basis, and there's nothing better to me than a fresh tomato in the summer. Under normal circumstances, you have to wait until after your last frost date in order to plant your tomatoes because they are so sensitive to cold and light frost can damage or outright kill them. But I still try to do what I can do in order to get my tomato plants out early. So I have a strategy in order to get the earliest possible tomatoes into my kitchen, out of my garden. So what you see in front of me right now are 3 1-gallon milk jugs, and underneath each of these milk jugs is a tomato. So my indeterminate tomatoes, what I like to do is I plant the overwhelming majority of them after my last frost date when things are safe. And for me in my climate, my last frost date is roughly around March 25th. I planted these tomatoes right here March 14th. So they have been growing for almost an entire week now to try and get an early jump start on the season. And I am using these 1-gallon milk jugs as little mini greenhouses in order to protect the tomatoes in case we were to get a late frost or a late freeze. Now it's important to note that these 1-gallon milk jugs right here will provide frost protection, and they will provide some thermal security, a few extra degrees at night if you were to get a very light frost or a very light freeze, but they will not provide substantial protection. So if you get a hard freeze into the 20s, these won't provide a lot of protection. However, you can use these to get your crops out about 2 weeks before your typical frost date, because by then you usually only have a threat of lighter frosts or freezes. So of course, make sure to check your extended forecast before using this method. Now that we've gone over the caveats, I want to take you and show you what it looks like underneath these greenhouses. So right in front of me is a simple 1-gallon milk jug. These didn't even hold milk, they held natural spring water. So I repurposed this as a mini greenhouse for my tomato seedlings. So all 3 tomato seedlings that you see right here in those milk jugs, they are all extra indeterminate tomatoes that I grew. I always start extra seed because I want to try and get my tomatoes out as early as possible. So I always recommend starting extra seed or buying a few extra plants if you like to buy plants and not start seed, and then you can experiment with getting things out early. You don't want to do this with your core crop because it is possible that a very late hard freeze could come in and really wreak havoc if you take these risks. But this is why it's worth doing this with a few extra plants, because if you lose them, it's no big deal. You still have your main plants, but if you're lucky and you get a good winter and things go according to plan, you get the benefits of very early tomatoes in your climate. So the way that I've found this works best is you plant your tomatoes very deeply when they're young. You bury them pretty much up to their stalk right here. And wow, this tomato was probably only buried about this high a week ago, but it has already probably doubled in size. And we had a really chilly night last night with about 25-mile-an-hour winds. We got down to 30 degrees, and this tomato, as you can see, is healthy as a horse. And it is surprising the amount of insulation the ground itself can give your tomatoes. So the way I like to do this is when I place these little greenhouses on top, I like to take the earth or some mulch and bring it around the sides to really lock in that heat and hold in the heat of the earth. And doing this, I've actually been able to overwinter pepper plants all the way into January. And up against my house, they've actually they've survived hard freezes. So what I like to do is I use these milk jugs that I simply cut the bottom out of to try and make things as large as possible. And I leave these on at all times until after my last frost date. And this has a dual purpose. Not only will it protect them at night in case you get a very cold night or a late frost, it will actually collect the solar energy during the day, and it will warm things up, and it gets nice and warm in there. And your tomatoes will grow much more quickly thanks to the greenhouse effect than they would from the natural ambient heat. So what I do is I leave the cap off, because you need to vent that extra heat during the day, and you also want to make sure that you let any moisture escape. And then if you get a very cold night where it's going to fall into the 30s Fahrenheit and there's a chance of a frost or freeze, you just pop that lid right on. And then that will be an airtight container, and this tomato will be completely shielded from any kind of frost, and also get several degrees of freeze protection in case you were to get a bit of a light freeze. So this is really a versatile way for you to protect your plants and get them out a few weeks before the last frost date. And now I'll take you through and I'll show you the other ones. This plant right here is doing really great. And this tomato right here is a super sweet. It's a cherry style tomato, and they usually yield the first. So I like doing these with the earliest tomatoes possible. That way I can get actual tomatoes out of my garden as early as possible. And the last one right here, this is another cherry called Sun Gold. This is a yellow cherry tomato. So I'm really excited that I was able to get these in so early. And if you actually look, this tomato right here is already starting to flower. So here we are about a full week before my last frost date, and I already have flowering tomatoes thriving in my garden beds. So I just wanted to share with you this little garden hack that can help you get unnaturally early tomatoes and really get a jump start in the season. For most of you, you can do this completely free, since you probably already buy milk or jugs of water, and you probably have these jugs just lying around. Even if you have to go out and buy them, it's usually only about 79 cents for a jug of purified water, so you can go out and buy a few, actually use the water for whatever you need to use it for, and just repurpose the jug. So it's a really easy and cheap way to get a jump start on the season. So everybody, I really hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in my garden, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
Look at this boy right here. He looks so comfortable. He looks as snug as a bug in a rug. Dale, you look like a hot dog all wrapped up in your bun. Look at you. Have a good night, buddy. We'll see you in the morning.